Okay, now imagine with me, if you will, for a second. You feel terrible. You've consulted with over 24 endocrinologists, internal medicine specialists, and general practice MDs, but your medical condition only seems to get worse. And nothing from any of these doctors ever resembled any sort of solution. Would you lose hope? Well, that's exactly the situation today's guest found herself in. Exasperated and desperate Elle Russ decided to take control of her own health and resolve 2 severe bouts of hypothyroidism all on her own. And you won't believe how she did it. Elle says she went from fat, foggy, and fatigued to fit, focused, and full of life. We'll talk to Elle today about her new book, why humans are the only animals with eating disorders, and creating sustainable energy. All that and more coming up on today's Peak Performers Podcast.
Welcome to this edition of Peak Performers Podcast
with your host, Thor Conklin.
Thor will be sharing the necessary tools, strategies, and psychology you'll need to become a peak performer in any area of your life or business.
Elle, thank you so much for joining us today. I know the audience is going to get so much out of today's episode. This is an area that I am so passionate about. I've gone on my own journey over the last 4 or 5 years, and what you're going to be talking about today is really at the center of what I use to create the energy that I've created in my life. And I'm really interested to know some of the, I'll call them hacks. What are some of the things that we, especially in the American diet, what are we missing? What are the mistruths out there right now?
Well, you started off with a loaded one. It's great to be here. This is really important because the way that our brain functions and the stamina that our brain has throughout the day is really what is applicable to any kind of performance, whether that be physical or corporate. It really doesn't matter. So everybody should be concerned about their brain operating at optimal level. And one of the ways that we fail in that arena is mainstream science and literature on diets over the years have all been wrong. Up until the past few years, we've all realized that. Even, the cover of Time magazine a couple years ago had a picture of butter and it said, eat butter. Everything we knew about fat was wrong. And so one of those paradigms, the old paradigm that's wrong, is that our primary fuel for our body should be glucose. And when you get into that paradigm, the worst case is you end up with type 2 diabetes. And the best case is you've got hypoglycemia and you're having a hangry, angry, cranky, hungry brain fart meltdown after, 3-4 hours of not eating. And that really holds back on performance. So what we've learned through the paleo, primal, ancestral, evolutionary health world, and while a lot of people think it's a funny gimmick to go, eat like a caveman, there is something to it, not just something, it's science. And that is eating along with what is aligned with our DNA as humans. So for example, no one listening to this has ever fed a horse a ribeye steak. Ever. And you wouldn't. That would be mean to do that to that horse. They are not genetically designed to process that food. Same with a cow. Cow has 4 stomachs. They're supposed to be eating grass and process high level of cellulose. We are not. So this is a human-aligned diet and lifestyle. It is not a mimic or a gimmick. It's not manipulating our system like other diets do, and then that's why they fail. And when you become fat adapted and your primary fuel converts from glucose to fat, now you have a better chance at everything in life, not just losing weight and health and all of those things. It's an anti-inflammatory paradigm as well, but really it hits the brain. And, recent books such as Dave Asprey's Headstrong, other books we talk about with ketosis and what it does for the brain. If we look at Alzheimer's even, which is considered a type 3 type of diabetes, that is from too much glucose. What do you do for someone that just got diagnosed on Alzheimer's? You put them on a ketogenic, low carb, high fat diet. Why is that? Because our brains prefer it. So the paleo primal paradigm not only will help one's brain, but in the arena that I work in, or related to my book, The Paleo Thyroid Solution, you have more thyroid hormone receptors in your brain than anywhere else in the body. And it's really important to make sure that that gland and its production, or if you're taking exogenous thyroid hormones, that those are being metabolized properly. Those are all related to how your brain functions. And when it starts to go down, and I'll just give you one random symptom of low thyroid function, is this feeling that you're getting dumb, not even being able to focus. You'd have to reread paragraphs over and over again. There's people that have gotten fired from their jobs when they deal with numbers. Inability to multitask completely goes out the window when your thyroid has suboptimal function and metabolism. Now, you can really nip a lot of this in the bud by just adopting a paleo, primal, clean paradigm and optimizing some nutrients, and you should be good to go. But if you are suffering and you've gotten too far back and you have a thyroid issue, now you're looking at literally probably not even being able to function in your job, much less life. So that would be a really debilitating issue for someone. Why is this applicable to everyone listening? Because everyone listening has a thyroid gland. And if you don't, it was surgically removed. And if it was surgically removed, you're taking thyroid hormones, because if you're not, you'd be dead. It is the master gland of the human body, in control of everything. Metabolic rate, fat burning. It is the regulator and producer of all of our sex hormones. It's the master gland. You can't live without it. And so if you're living a life with subpar, thyroid output, you're likely not going to be thinking as clearly. Your energy is going to be horrible, and your comprehension, your literal brain abilities are going to go down. And it's a very scary thing, but if anyone out there is experiencing something where they're silently feeling like they're getting dumb or they're aging more, or other symptoms would be like, aside from physical ones, would be things like when you've lost the will to pursue your dreams. You have a sense of general malaise where you just don't care anymore, like you're ready to give up. And, anytime someone's, and not a usual hitting the wall, like you're going to go, and you're shooting for a goal and you come across a bump in the road. Not that. It would be a huge bump in the road. You'd feel it. And that's the time to really assess your health, because it is all related to the brain. And it's really important that our brains are functioning at a really high level. I can tell you this right now. I used to be extremely hypoglycemic at one point and was a sugar addict. I was up, I was down. Being fat adapted and living a paleo primal life is the ultimate in blood glucose management. It's the ultimate in adrenal management. And why are those two things important? Because adrenals are absolutely related to our hormones, thyroid and testosterone. So for example, let's say you're a guy, you're either not working out at all and you're super stressed and not getting sleep, or you're working out a lot and not getting, it doesn't matter in which way stress is coming to your life, lack of sleep or overworking out and not eating well. Any of these things are stressors. And when we have any of those stresses happen to us, cortisol will rise to adjust to that. And cortisol is antagonistic testosterone. And why is that important? Well, testosterone is important for both men and women. It's really important for men. When you guys get low testosterone, it's not just about low sex drive. It's literally about being exhausted for you guys. And that is a big problem right now that we're seeing a lot of, is low testosterone issues with men and also women. We need it as well to be strong-headed females. So if you're an alpha female out there like I am, and you are pursuing goals and you're a badass, then, it's really important that your testosterone levels are strong. And if you are feeling like you want to be that person, or you're trying to be that and you can't somehow, it might be an issue with just naturally trying to boost testosterone. So if you have cortisol levels through the roof because you're stressed to the gills and you're running around and you're, not taking the time to relax, enjoy life, and treat yourself and your body right, it's going to be conflicting with your testosterone. You don't want to do that as a female or a male. And it's also going to cause a million other problems. So I know that's a big, long tip. There's so many things in there, but that's an overall, and we can get into any of these specifics.
That's amazing.
People ask me all the time, what's the difference between responsibility and accountability? Well, a lot, actually. Responsibility is the thing that makes me, as a business owner and an entrepreneur, get out of bed every day, make all the phone calls, do what has to be done for the sake of my business. And the success of my business pretty much lies solely on my shoulders. Enter accountability. If you're an entrepreneur or business owner and you're just not quite seeing the results you want, you might just think for a second how you could benefit from having a partner. And I'm not talking about some Shark Tank scenario where somebody gets a huge percentage of the business you've created. I'm talking about Thor Conklin. He's a profitability consultant and an accountability master. If this sounds like something interesting to you or something that you could benefit from, I challenge you to take responsibility for yourself and for your business and go to thorconklin.com/accountability. That's really all you got to do. Take the first step to the best business decision you'll ever make. thorconklin.com/accountability.
I noticed that when my diet goes in the wrong direction and I add some processed food, literally the next day I just wake up now and I'm just like stiff. My whole body just feels like it just aged about 20 years. And hunger normally for me is, I'll go and when I'm hungry, I'll eat. But it's not this like overwhelming like drive. When I'm eating processed foods or something high in carbohydrates, it's like I'm obsessed. It's like I'm starving. My stomach's going crazy. It's like I need food now versus, okay, I'm a little hungry, but you know what? I'm good for the next hour or 2 or 3 hours. What is that? What's happening in the body? Why is that happening to me?
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, glucose is a real cheap trick. It's a real cheap trick. By the way, glucose, that could be a bunch of asparagus that has about 20 grams of carbohydrates in it, or it could be a Coca-Cola with 38 grams of carbohydrates. Carbs are carbs are carbs. Doesn't matter if you're getting it from fruit. Your body doesn't know the difference between 3 slices of sugared mango and a Coca-Cola. One might have a little bit more beneficial stuff in it, but at the end of the day, your body's going to process that the same way. Glucose is a real cheap trick because it can spark you up. It can give you energy, but then it will drop and will dissipate. It is not sustaining or satiating like fat is. Let me give you an example. There's not one animal in this world that has eating issues. Okay. Like I've never met, maybe a domesticated dog if you overfed it or something, but for the most part, animals don't have eating disorders, right? So why do we? When you get onto the fat adapted paradigm, like you said, you never get crazy hungry where you're dying all of a sudden because you're not having the drop in blood glucose. Every time that thing drops, you're dying. You become cranky. Your brain doesn't work. And that is because you're a sugar burner. Well, how do you know you're a sugar burner who's dependent on glucose? I would ask anyone in the audience this. Number one, can you go 4 to 6 to 8, 24 hours without eating and not have a meltdown? Most people would be like, no, 6 hours would be my maximum, and I'd probably be going crazy then. Well, when you're fat adapted, you can go 8, 10, 24 hours. I had a cup of bone broth this morning with a slab of butter. I already went and worked out. It's about 1 p.m. here. My brain is flying high because I'm fat adapted. And for some reason, I could not get food at all for the next 24 hours. I would be 100% fine. Able to read a book, able to write, able to multitask, able to do everything I need to do in the power arena I need to do it in with no drops. Most people listening, probably sugar burners, if you're not fat, would go, that's it unheard of, right? And it is if you're a sugar burner. And so getting fat adapted back again, into a lifestyle aligned with our genetics. Our ancestors never ate more than 80 carbohydrates a day. Okay. No one had type 2 diabetes. Okay. If anyone here watching television, every single commercial is for type 2 diabetes. We see it. It's out there. There's a reason for that. It's because the government food pyramid says eat 6 to 11 servings of grains a day and 2 to 4 servings of fruit. That is a carbohydrate overload, and it is also a diabetes causing. The reason we have this type 2 diabetes is because our bodies do not like this paradigm of carb dependency. Yeah,
and really my waist immediately just bloats up. It's like someone put a balloon in my stomach. It's crazy.
Well, now, if you eat grains, and so here's the thing about feeling stiff and sore. So anyone with any kind of autoimmunity of any kind, so that could be like rheumatoid arthritis, or it could be Hashimoto's, or any kind of autoimmune issues, you really have to stay away from the grains and the legumes and all of that stuff because it is known to trigger those antibodies, and it's known to trigger particularly that kind of feeling of stiffness in one's hands, or that kind of arthritic-y, like, oh, I'm getting old and I'm creaky. And there's a few reasons for that. A, it is inflammatory, and it's a cheap source of glucose. So if you're not used to that and then you eat it, particularly for you, Thor, then you're kind of in a hangover probably.
Yeah.
The next day you feel a hungover. I do too. If I kind of have a treat and I splurge on something that's high in sugar, even if it's fruit, I will wake up the next day and feel like a little hungover, even though I didn't drink.
Yeah.
So
and then you crave more of it.
That's right. And again, it's because even if you've dipped in for a 24-hour period or 48-hour period, you can kind of start to go down that rabbit hole again. It's like crack. It's a little bit like crack, but again, you can nip it right in the bud by eating fat immediately. So if you have like a bad event, your next day you're craving glucose. In that moment you're craving it, the best thing to do would like get a spoonful of butter, get a spoonful of coconut butter or olive oil, just take a quick sip, and that will then reset it, and you should be satiated, your brain, within 20 minutes, and you'll be like, I don't even want that thing I was just craving.
Oh, wow. That's very good advice.
Most of the time, though, if you're fat adapted, though, you really often don't get too far down that line because it doesn't feel good and because you can bring it right back in. Now, when you start to get fat adapted, it takes about, 3 to 4 weeks. Mark Sisson, author of the best-selling book, The Primal Blueprint, and I'm the host of his podcast, The Primal Blueprint Podcast. It's really about the paradigm in the past. It's almost like this. So for years, people thought, oh my gosh, don't eat saturated fat. It's going to cause heart attacks. Because that's what they thought. Because the premise to begin with of the studies they were doing were not factoring in carbohydrate load. So they might have been looking at men in 50 who were eating a bunch of steak, but they were also eating a ton of carbs and other shit. And then they were getting heart attacks. So they thought, oh, it must be this high fat. It's not. In fact, the only time a high-fat diet is dangerous at all or could lead to that would be in the presence of a high-carbohydrate diet. So I would ask you this, what would you rather eat in life? Would you rather go on statins and never be able to eat this stuff? Or would you rather eat all of this stuff and not eat like the bread or whatever? I don't know about you. I'd rather eat steak and butter than a piece of bread if I had the choice between the two. And I think most people would probably go, yeah, I'd take the piece of meat with the butter, or I'd take, any kind of fat. So at the end of the day, it's like not only is it not good for you, but if you really look at the grand scheme of food options out there, you're asking for trouble and you're asking to never be able to eat those things if you go down this carb dependency road, right? So it's like you have a choice. Do you want to eat high carb, and then live that life, which is going to ultimately lead to something bad? Or do you want to eat, all of the good stuff? Look, not one grain. I've never met one person that ate a grain without putting fat on it. Have you ever met anyone that ate a bowl of oatmeal plain without butter, without sugar, without milk, No, you've got to dress this stuff up because it's just sludge and it's just pure glucose and it's really not meant for human consumption anyway. It causes intestinal permeability. It's an exacerbator of autoimmune conditions. So it's like you can eat that bowl of pasta, whoever eats it plain. It's the butter that makes it good, right? It's the butter, man. So it's like, why wouldn't you? So the problem is people go to the doctor, they have high cholesterol statins, they want to put them on statins, and they're like, oh no, I can't eat cheese. No, actually, you don't even have to go on statins. Follow a paleo primal paradigm. You'll fix your cholesterol and you'll be eating more fat than you ever were before. Yeah. So again, these are old paradigms and they are just, it's so the same back in the day, and this is what's happening right now. We're seeing lots of athletes get type 2 diabetes, and one of the most exemplary, I think, situations here is Timothy Noakes. He's a professor from South Africa, and he wrote a book called The Lore of Running, and it's all about, back in the day when those marathon runners, it's all about carbon up before the race and, carbon it, and everyone thought that we were supposed to be dominated by glucose in our body. Now he has type 2 diabetes, and he's had to fall on his sword and come out, and his colleagues have ripped on him because he's come out and been like, I was wrong. The science was wrong. We were wrong 30 years ago. We were wrong. And we're seeing that now. Lots of athletes who are training on that carb dependency paradigm, even though they look good, they don't look like someone you think would have diabetes. They're thin, they're ripped, they're looking great, but their blood is diabetic. So that's another thing. You can look at someone's body and go, ooh, I'd like to have her body. I don't know. You might not want to have her body once you see her triglycerides or her blood work. Do you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So you can be skinny fat, just because someone's healthy. And that's where people get really shocked. And I suggest anyone look up Peter Attia, Attia. He has a TED Talk. He's a doctor. He was fit and healthy, ate what he thought he should eat. The classic, I'm healthy, I work out, and I eat 3 meals a day. He had a patient that came in to see him that was diabetic, and she was about to have one of her limbs removed because of diabetes. And his whole talk is about how he judged her as a doctor. He totally judged her in that moment, like, this idiot. Why would she do this? Now she's got to get her leg amputated. Like, what is she thinking? Well, then he gets his blood work, finds out he's pre-diabetic. And he's like, what the fuck? How? And he actually tears up during this discussion, and it's really worth watching because he was a doctor If he didn't know, you know what I mean?
Yep.
What do you think the average person? That's why people are getting their legs amputated. It's not for the fact that they're not trying. It's that the information is wrong. Doctors don't know about nutrition. You go to a doctor and they tell you you're pre-diabetic or you have diabetes, and you go, what do I do? And they go, take insulin. They should say immediately adopt a paleo primal paradigm immediately, because that is how to reverse type 2 diabetes or Atkins, whatever. They are roughly the same in terms of high fat, moderate protein, low carb. So it seems as though that paradigm is what fixes all of these things, right? Alzheimer's, partially, type 2 diabetes. There's a reason for that. Anti-inflammatory cancer patients. There's ketogenic diets for cancer specifically, and there's a reason for that, because cancer preys on sugar.
Yes, it does.
And so, when they try to find cancer cells in your body, what do? They inject you with glucose. Hello, making the connection, people. See what I'm saying? So again, glucose is the enemy. We don't want it. We need some of it, but we don't need a lot of it. We're getting too much. So I'll give you a rough thing for everyone out there. Most people are probably eating 300 carbohydrates or more a day. You need to be under 150 unless you are a bricklayer or a professional athlete, like a basketball professional NBA athlete. Not, I work out 2 hours a day. That's still not athlete level. So unless you're an athlete or a bricklayer, under 150 carbs, if you're a woman and you're my size, which I'm 5'2", you're looking at under 100. And so it really is, you find your own personal threshold, but that's where you have to start, is looking at what am I consuming, and you have to start kind of counting carbohydrates and start to look at what am I doing if you're not doing well. The other thing too is that blood glucose is so managed and under control and steady when you are fat adapted and your primary fuel is fat. You don't have these ups and downs. You don't have these meltdowns. Think about it. In the middle of a crazy corporate day, I used to work in the corporate world. I managed 100 people throughout the state of California when I was 23 years old. I had an extremely demanding job. And, I wish I had known about this then, because back then it was like, oh my gosh, I need a pick-me-up, coffee, bagel. I could barely survive. I'm like sleeping on the train home. Had I known what I know now, my gosh, I would have probably prevented lots of issues I had throughout my life. So getting fat adapted and eating a diet aligned with our DNA as humans. And I want to throw out, if anyone's curious about the science behind this, Paleo Manifesto is a great book, or the documentary by C.J. Hunt called The Perfect Human Diet. I believe it's free on Netflix right now. It is a great expose into the science behind all of this. And of course, you could always go to Mark's Daily Apple or Primal Blueprint. But people are moving more and more towards this because people are getting more metabolic disorders, whether it be thyroid or type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetic. And it's just an onslaught. We've got to stop it, And so that's our mission at the Primal Blueprint and mine in general. And also too, how good of a performer are you going to be in life or business when you're falling asleep at your desk at 2 p.m. because you ate a pasta lunch out with your buddies?
Yeah, it's got to start with the energy. And you know what I love about this also is you can start it at any age. I literally have my mom doing this, and she's 82. We just got back from Germany. We were over there for a business event, and she was going nonstop. And everybody was like, wow, I can't believe that you're doing this. She has struggled with her weight her entire life. And literally at 82, because it just took me a while to figure out what was going on. And I taught her, and her entire life has shifted. She's down 35 pounds, and it's like she's 20 years younger.
It really is amazing, and I challenge anyone to Google. There's a African American woman that started bodybuilding at like age 60, and now she's 90.
Amazing.
She's a great example of, if you feel like it's too late for you, go look up that lady, and you'll be inspired. And then also Louise Hay started her life and her business at age 60. So, listen, Mark Sisson is 64 this July. Anyone can Google him and see what he looks like. And what you look like. And I'll tell you what, that's like the new poster for what that age should look like these days. There's no reason to not be able to achieve that for anybody. Now, that's not to say everyone's going to want the same 8-pack of abs that Mark has or has the time or the wherewithal to do that. But you don't have to be. So many people, I'm turning 44 this summer. I look 32.
Yeah.
And Also, I have more, and some of my friends from back home or in general, everyone complains about, well, getting old. I'm like, don't put me in that category. Don't you dare throw me into that. You know what I mean? You're allowing yourself to get old. Don't, life is so much better. And honestly, what fat adaptation does for one's brain is probably the biggest component of this, because yes, it's great for weight. Yes, you could cure a disease. Of course, there's all sorts of great health benefits, but really it's the mental. That's what everyone says about this paradigm. And the other thing that's consistent among people that have been in a bad place and then come to this and change the paradigm, the one every success story we get from this, the basic theme in every one of them is, but the best part about this is that I no longer have obsessions with food, and I'm no longer a sugar addict, and I'm not addicted. Yep. Thor, I used to think about food all the time. Even when I was super fit and and following this eat every 2, 3, 4 hours paradigm, I thought that you must have to suffer in order to get that body, that maybe other people weren't being honest with me and maybe everybody was struggling inside. But I was thinking about food all day long. Not only was I thinking about food, even after lunch, I'd be thinking, what am I going to have for dinner? And I'd be struggling to not eat in between. Because you're never fully satiated if you're eating a low fat, situation.
That's so true.
1,200 calories, you might lose weight because the calorie deficit, but then something's going to go wrong. You're going to get some hormonal thing that will be off because you're not getting enough fat. Or again, your adrenals and your blood glucose is going to totally suffer and you'll become hypoglycemic. So I can just tell you right now, that is the biggest freedom. The other freedom is with travel. We hear this all the time. So because you're not hungry every 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, sometimes 8, 10, you can take an entire flight from here to, New York, 5, 6 hours, and the hour at the airport, both sides of it. So now you get to the hotel, it's been maybe 8 or 9 hours and you haven't eaten a thing.
Yeah.
Most people on the plane are freaking out, have to have their Pringles, pulling out snacks. And so that's what I hear all the time when my friends or people that I've known who've gone this route and changed their life, they're always texting me like, oh my God, I cannot believe this. I just took a 5-hour flight. I'm like, I know. And that's a sense of freedom, to be on that plane and just not even care and not have any kind of meltdown. There's no lapse in mental energy, physical energy, emotional energy. It's steady. And by the way, a lot of people go to the primal paradigm to fix anxiety issues, to fix things that have to do with, mood disorders. Because mood disorders are so related to the ups and downs of glucose. Everybody knows what it's like when they have a drop in glucose as a sugar burner because you're cranky.
Yeah.
Right? You might snap at somebody, or something. Not that that's right. I'm just saying that we've all been there. And, or you're so hungry, you're like, I got to have food fucking now, I'm going to kill somebody. Like that feeling. Like you said earlier, you don't, I'm the same way now where I get hungry and I'm like, yeah, it's about ready to eat. But I don't get to that point anymore where I'm like, oh my God, I'm dying. But when you're a sugar burner, that can suddenly come on. Out of nowhere, you'd be like, oh my God. I used to have to stop in between Hollywood and Malibu, which is really not that long of a drive. But I was having such meltdowns, hypoglycemic meltdowns in the car. My brain, energy, everything, I couldn't handle it. It was like my brain was hurting or starving. It was starving of glucose, the drug it was addicted to. And I'd have to drive to a supermarket and get out and get a snack just for the rest of the way home. I couldn't even wait an extra 15 minutes. That's what it's like when you're a hypoglycemic sugar burner. And that life sucks. It's not fun. Your attitude's not going to be as great. And frankly, people are pretty marveled at my level of mental and physical energy, but it's because of this fat adaptation.
Thank you so much for listening today. I really do appreciate your time, and I hope you found today's show valuable. If you would like to receive these shows automatically to your phone or to your computer, simply go to iTunes and subscribe. After listening to several of the shows, if you're so inclined, please leave us a 5-star rating, as this helps us reach additional people and spread the message. If you're truly committed to taking your life to the next level and doing whatever it takes to become a peak performer, but something's holding you back, something is blocking your way, and you just can't seem to figure out what it is, send me an email to info@thorconklin.com. And I'd be more than happy to get on the phone with you. We'll schedule a 15-minute discovery call. No obligation, no cost. I absolutely love to hear from the listeners. And if there's something I can do to help, I'd be more than happy to do that. Also, if you found something of great interest in today's show and you want to share that with your friends and family, simply go to my Facebook page, Thor Conklin. Click on the episode, hit the share button, and share it on your page. You can follow me at Twitter at Thor Conklin. The website is thorconklin.com. We're constantly adding new free resources, discussing additional tricks, tips, tools, and strategies on how to be a peak performer. Remember, I try to keep these episodes short so you can listen to them during dot time, doing other things, commuting, driving, walking, working out. Decide to be a peak performer in all that you do. And until tomorrow, have an absolutely amazing day.
That brings us to the end of another episode of the Peak Performers Podcast. Be on the lookout for part 2 with Elle Russ, where we'll discuss being committed to your health, putting up or shutting up, as well as all about the paleo lifestyle. That's next on the Peak Performers Podcast. See you at the top.